So there's this video making the rounds, and it's making a huge claim that the recent elections in Bihar were, to put it mildly, deeply unfair. Now, the allegations are incredibly serious, covering everything from potential bribery all the way to voter suppression. In this explainer, we're going to break down the core arguments from that source, slide by slide, just to help you understand the full picture being presented.
Right off the bat, the source video does not pull any punches. It opens with this incredibly provocative statement, immediately framing the entire election as fundamentally compromised. And that's the central claim we're going to be digging into throughout this explainer.
Okay, just a quick but really important note before we dive in. Our goal here is to be a neutral guide. We're simply going to walk you through the main allegations laid out in the source video, which fall into about 3 key areas. We are not here to validate or debunk these claims, but to break them down so you can clearly understand the argument being made.
All right, so let's get into the first major allegation. This one centers on what the source calls direct financial influence, or voter inducement. Basically, the claim is that money was used to directly sway voters. So let's look at the specifics of how this was allegedly done.
The centerpiece of this argument is a payment of 10,000 rupees. The source alleges that this exact amount was transferred directly into the bank accounts of 12.5 million women all across Bihar. And get this, right in the middle of the election period. Now, as you can see from this timeline, the timing is absolutely critical to the source's argument. These payments were allegedly made after October 6. Why does that date matter? Well, that's when the Model Code of Conduct, or MCC, came into effect. For anyone who doesn't know, the MCC is basically a set of rules meant to ensure a level playing field, and it specifically forbids the government in power from announcing new financial schemes that could influence voters. And this is where the source draws a really sharp contrast. It alleges that while the Election Commission, or EC, gave these payments the green light in Bihar, it took a completely different approach in other states. The video claims that in past elections in places like Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, the EC strictly blocked very similar government schemes, citing that exact same model code of conduct. And the argument doesn't stop there. The source claims this wasn't just a one-time thing. It was also tied to a promise of up to 200,000 rupees more down the line. On top of that, it alleges that over 180,000 of the women who received this money were then appointed as election duty volunteers, which the source argues really blurs the line of neutrality right there at the polling booth.
All right, let's pivot to the second major set of claims. And this one questions something absolutely fundamental to a fair election, the integrity of the voter list itself. I mean, think about it. If the list of who can even cast a ballot is flawed, what does that say about the final result?
So the argument here is basically a 3-pronged attack on the voter lists. First, the source alleges a huge number of duplicate voters. Second, that voters were given subsidized travel in a way that breaks election law. And third, that certain groups of voters were specifically targeted and removed from the lists.
The first number presented here is frankly staggering. Citing an investigation by the Reporters Collective, the source claims that Bihar's final voter list had over 1.4 million suspected duplicate voters. The argument isn't just that these are simple clerical errors, it's that they represent the potential for fraudulent voting on a massive scale.
Okay, to really get the next point, we have to look at a specific law. The source points to the Representation of the People Act of 1951. And as you can see, the law is crystal clear. If a candidate pays to transport voters to a polling station, that is legally defined as a corrupt practice. So, keeping that law in mind, the source then presents news footage from ABP News. In the clips, voters and party leaders seem to confirm that special trains were organized and paid for to bring voters to Bihar from other states. The video argues this is a direct violation of the act we just looked at. Next, the source turns to the issue of voter deletion. It focuses on something called a special intensive revision of the voter lists, which is supposed to be a routine cleanup. But when you look at this chart, the source argues something went seriously wrong. The final list ended up with nearly 8 million fewer voters than the projected eligible population for the state. That's a massive gap. And this graphic really illustrates one of the video's most serious allegations. It claims that this voter deletion wasn't random at all. According to its analysis, while Muslims make up about 17% of Bihar's population, they accounted for 33%, a third, of all the names removed from the final voter list. And to put a human face on all these numbers, the source includes testimony from voters on the ground. This quote comes from a man from a Dalit community. He says that he and his wife, despite being regular voters, showed up at their polling station only to find out their names had been completely struck from the list. Okay, so this brings us to the third and final category of allegations. Here, the source zooms out from individual voters and specific lists to question the integrity of the entire system. You know, the rules and the referees that are supposed to guarantee a fair contest for everyone. So check out the sequence of events the source lays out here regarding CCTV footage from polling booths. It claims that first, a high court ordered the EC to provide footage. Then, right after that ruling, the government allegedly amended the rules to restrict access. And finally, the EC brought in a new rule to delete all footage after just 45 days, which the source argues makes any real post-election investigation almost impossible. The source then highlights what it calls a fundamental change to how the referees of the election are even chosen. The claim centers on a new law that removed the Chief Justice of India from the selection panel for election commissioners and replaced them with a government minister. The argument is pretty simple. This change gives the ruling party way more control over who gets appointed. Finally, the video pulls all of these points together to build its case for what it calls systemic bias. The allegations range from manipulating the election dates to help the ruling party, to turning a blind eye when its leaders violate the model code of conduct, to even passing a new law that shields election commissioners from being sued for their official actions. So we've walked through all these key allegations from the source material. They are detailed, they are complex, and they are very, very serious. Which brings us, of course, to the big question. Why does all of this matter? Well, according to the source, the ultimate conclusion is this. It's not any single issue in isolation. Instead, it argues that the combined effect of alleged bribery, a potentially compromised voter list, and changes to the very rules and institutions guarding the process, all of that together creates a situation where the fundamental fairness of the entire election can be questioned. And it's really important to get this next point. The source frames this as an issue that is way bigger than which party won or lost in Bihar. The argument being presented is that these alleged actions, taken together, represent a threat to the health and the trustworthiness of the democratic system as a whole. And that leaves us right here, with this final, crucial question for you to think about. When an election's fairness is challenged with allegations this detailed and this serious, what does it actually take to maintain public trust in democracy? It's a question that really goes to the heart of the entire process.